In this video, we are going to be taking a look at the best $600 gaming PC in 2019. This is being recorded in the month of May, but this is a pretty future-proof build, so it should be great for months to come. This PC can definitely max out all games 1080p with really great playable frame rates over 60, and actually a lot of games over 100 FPS with ultra settings 1080p. This is also going to be a beastly workstation PC, because keep in mind, when you build a gaming PC, you're not only building a gaming machine, but you're also getting a computer. And this thing is going to be ready for anything you throw at it, from rendering to recording to video editing and picture editing in Photoshop, live streaming, surfing the web, whatever you want to do. This PC can do it all for a very modest price. As always, all of the parts can be found listed and linked down below in the description to Amazon, and if you want to go ahead and check out a more in-depth guide on this build, I actually wrote up a post about this gaming PC on my website. So just go ahead and search for $600 gaming PC in Google and scroll down until you find my result, which says #1 most powerful $600 gaming PC 2019, all games ultra. I'm not sure exactly how it's ranking right now, so you might have to scroll down a bit and maybe even visit the second page to find it, or it might be ranking at the top. I don't know, you have to look for it. But once you find my page, you can go ahead and check out every single component a bit more in depth, and I'm also going to give you guys a few tips about PC building in general, which will really help you out if you are new to building a gaming PC. This is a really great PC. I'm really happy about it. Prices of components have finally come down, so we're getting a really fast CPU along with a bunch of fast RAM, an SSD, and a sweet video card, all housed inside of a slick micro ATX case. Now, the base model is going to come out to around $610. I went slightly over budget, but it's worth it for the performance. I just couldn't pass up some of these parts. And if you want to do some sick overclocking and push your CPU to the limit, which I would highly recommend, you can also overclock your RAM as well, which we'll get to. But if you want to do that, I've included an aftermarket CPU cooler option. That's going to bump up the price to $640, but it's definitely worth it, guys. And keep in mind, that's before mail-in rebates. So with a lot of the deals you're going to be getting, I don't include them in the build price, but if you get a lot of these parts on sale with mail-in rebates, you could probably get this for less than $600 in total. Without further ado, we're going to hop right into it. For the CPU, I chose, of course, the Ryzen 5 2600. This is the second generation in the Ryzen 5 line, and it's a 3.4 GHz 6-core processor. I love Ryzen CPUs because they're fast, they're reliable, they're very cost effective, and best of all, they overclock like no other. The CPU really holds its own when compared to Team Blue's competing CPUs in the same price range, and it's only like $150, guys, so it's a really solid CPU. It can overclock very well, and it has 6 physical cores and 6 theoretical cores, for a total of 12 cores, because it has multi-threading. It has 12 threads. So the CPU is not only going to be a powerhouse in gaming, it's also going to be great for other tasks like rendering, like photo editing, like streaming. So it's a great multitasking CPU for a workstation and gaming PC. And the stock cooler that this thing comes with, a stealth cooler, is actually sufficient for some basic overclocking. You're not going to be able to do too much, but you can overclock a little bit with it. And if you want to push the CPU to the max, which I highly recommend, I have included a Hyper 212 Evo aftermarket CPU cooler. It's pretty much like the standard Air aftermarket CPU cooler. So if you want to push your CPU to the max, you're going to need a water cooler, but that's not really feasible on a $600 budget. But as far as air coolers go, you can definitely get some great numbers out of this CPU with the Hyper 212 Evo, and that's going to be an extra $30. So if you plan on overclocking, I would highly recommend getting that CPU cooler. By the way, overclocking is really easy, especially with Ryzen CPUs. You can do it in probably 30 minutes or less with a quick tutorial on YouTube. I overclocked my Ryzen 3 1200 with the stock cooler, just following a YouTube tutorial, and I pushed it to 4 GHz pretty easily. Anyway, moving on to the motherboard, I went for the Gigabyte B450M DS3H Micro ATX AM4 motherboard. This puppy has a B450 socket type. A B450 chipset. Obviously, the socket type is AM4 for Ryzen, but the chipset is AMD B450, which is like the second generation of the B350 chipset. So B350 and B450 are basically the most basic chipsets you can get in a motherboard that still allow for overclocking. So this is a pretty basic motherboard, but it still has all of the bells and whistles that you would look for in a traditional motherboard, especially on a budget like this. You're getting a motherboard that has plenty of SATA connectors, plenty of PCI slots for you, onboard Ethernet. It's also got RAID support, and best of all, it supports overclocking, and it is Crossfire also it can support Crossfire, and it's a micro ATX board, so it's going to fit into our micro ATX case. So it's got 4 DIMM slots as well, which is going to support up to 64 gigabytes of memory, which is great for future upgrades. And like I said, it also has Crossfire support, so if you want to add a second GPU in the future, you can as well. I don't want to restrict you guys. You will be able to upgrade this build as much as you want, and it's also very future-proof to begin with. So anyway, moving on to the RAM, I went for 2 sticks of 8 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance LPX. This is DDR4 2933. So I went for a pretty fast clock speed. I used to choose 2400 megahertz RAM, but one of my viewers actually commented and pointed out to me that 2400 isn't really that fast for Ryzen, which he's definitely right about. Ryzen CPUs are very dependent on the RAM, both the amount of RAM and even more so the speed of the RAM. So the faster your RAM, the more performance you're going to get out of your CPU. And since I went for such a high-end CPU with this build, and I also recommended overclocking, I figured that I would need some pretty good RAM package to support that. So 16 gigs of DDR4 2933 is what I chose. Once again, this is going to be awesome for gaming. You don't really need any more than 16 gigabytes, and to be honest with you guys, 8 gigabytes of RAM is definitely fine. But if you want to have multiple monitors going in your setup, and you want to have Google Chrome browsers open and a bunch of other stuff, and then you're also running games, etc., you're definitely going to want to have the extra RAM. And even if you're gaming in 1440p, that's especially going to be helpful when you have the extra RAM. And once again, it's great for the CPU, so really happy with that. And RAM prices have finally come down as well, so this is actually a pretty cheap option considering what you're getting out of this deal. For the storage, I went for the Western Digital Caviar Blue. Oh, sorry, it's not a Caviar Blue, it's just a blue. The Western Digital Blue 500 gigabyte 2.5-inch solid state drive. So this drive is around 65 bucks, but you're getting 500 gigabytes of SATA SSD storage. So SSDs are way faster than mechanical drives, and I know, 500 gigs isn't a whole lot, especially if you like to have a lot of your games downloaded all at once. But listen, you can upgrade and get another 1 terabyte hard drive, a mechanical drive for mass storage for like an extra 40 bucks. Then you're gonna have 1500 gigabytes of storage roughly. But guys, if you're gonna choose between just getting a mechanical drive or just getting a SSD, just go for the SSD. The difference is night and day. Your PC will boot so much faster. Your games will load really quickly. You'll be the first one in. You're not gonna have crashes or freezes. Like I used to have a mechanical drive that I had my Windows and drivers on, and my PC took ages to load. And once it finally was open, I had to wait for it to warm up. Air quotes, I'd say, quote unquote. If you ever feel like you have to wait for your PC to warm up first, it's probably because you have a mechanical drive. And if you just install your Windows and your OS and your drivers on an SSD, then you're going to have much better performance overall. And I think it's just really, really worth the investment. Next up for the video card, the moment you've all been waiting for. Drum roll, please. No, I'm just kidding. But for the video card, we went for the MSI Radeon RX 570, and this is an 8 gigabyte video card. It's got 8 gigs of dedicated memory, and it's only 160 bucks. So for the money, this is actually a beastly graphics card, and it's gonna be able to, like I said, to run a lot of games in 1080p with over 100 FPS ultra settings, especially when combined with the CPU and RAM that I've gone for with this build. Powering the build is going to be a Rosewill 500 watt 80 plus bronze certified semi-modular ATX power supply. Nothing really to write home about here, but it is semi-modular. It has an 80 plus bronze certification, which means it's going to be pretty power efficient, and best of all, it has enough wattage to supply the build, even if you're overclocking. Right now the build's consuming around 309 watts. If you overclock your CPU and your RAM, you can still do that with this power supply. You might even be able to overclock your GPU as well with this power supply, although you would want to look at the numbers for that. I haven't checked, so you should probably make sure that if you are going to overclock your RAM, CPU, and video card, that you have enough wattage for that. And then lastly, housing all the components, I went for the Fractal Design Focus G Mini Micro ATX case. So this is a really nice side panel window. It ships with 2 case fans in the front of the case, and 2 big case fans to bring air in. Now, it doesn't have any other case fans, so I would highly recommend adding a rear exhaust fan as well. You can pick one up for relatively cheap. But overall, it's got a lot of space, even though it's a micro ATX case. It has 2 external 5.25 inch bays, an internal 2.5 inch bay, and 2 3.5 inch bays. So not a ton of drive space, but with this 500 gigabyte SSD, you can also add 1 or 2 other drives to it. and you'll be good to go. Keep in mind that even though it only has one 2.5 inch bay, you can always buy a 2.5 inch adapter that fits into a 3.5 inch bay, so you could have another SSD if you wish. And it's going to support the video card as well. Even though it's a micro ATX case, like I said, it is pretty spacious on the inside. The total cost of this build is going to come out to around $640, which includes the aftermarket CPU cooler. And if you want to cut that out and not worry about it, then you could probably go for just the stock cooler, and that would bring your total down to $611. But keep in mind, you can definitely get some mail-in rebates on a lot of these components. So even with the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, you could probably pick up this whole build for $600 or less if you buy it at the right time, because parts are always going on sale. It's just a matter of knowing when to buy. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Once again, you can find all the parts down below in the description, and I will be in the comment section to answer any and all of your questions when I can. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.